So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Royal Society for this year's Experience Japan exhibition. My name's Hal Parker, and I work in the education section at the British Council in Tokyo. And the British Council is co-hosting today's event with Keio University. And I'm delighted to say this is the 5th year of the Experience Japan exhibition. And although I wasn't around when in 2011, at the event's inception, my colleagues tell me that they didn't really know how successful it would be. It was done as a trial, as a pilot at first, but here we are 5 years later. This event really has gone from strength to strength. And in the previous 4 years, we've had over 2,000 people, 2,000 visitors come to find out more about work, study and research opportunities in Japan. And I'm delighted to say that this year, we've had a record number of registrants, over 900 people have signed up, which I think is testament to the growing interest in study and work and research opportunities in Japan amongst people in the UK. Now, you may know that there is a huge drive in Japan from the government, academia and industry to internationalize. And universities are offering a wider array of short and long-term courses for international students, many of which are conducted entirely in English. Meanwhile, companies are hiring more and more international staff, and in some cases, even those who have no or very limited Japanese ability. So there really are more opportunities than ever before for studying and working in Japan, and the aim of today's event is to introduce some of these opportunities to you and hopefully inspire you to get out to Japan and experience Japan. So just before we get started, I'd like to briefly explain the format of the event. So upstairs we have representatives from around 20 leading universities from Japan, and they're here to introduce the various short and long-term study options and research options that they offer at their institutions. So I really do encourage you to go up there, go around the booths and talk to the representatives. Everybody speaks English. And also upstairs, we have representatives from the Embassy of Japan, the Japan Foundation, the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation, and also the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, JSPS. And they are here to provide information on the various scholarship and funding opportunities that they provide. Also upstairs, we have the job recruitment company DISCO, who are specialists in work opportunities in Japan. So if you're interested in working in Japan, please do visit the DISCO booth. And Kiko Hill from DISCO will be giving a presentation a little later this afternoon on work opportunities in Japan. And in this room, we'll be holding a series of seminars throughout the afternoon. And you have the program, I think, with you, so I won't go into too much detail here. But lots of interesting seminars, we hope, programmed for this afternoon. So please do pop in and out if you can. If you do go out and come back, and you find there are no seats available, you can go up to the Cone Centre on the ground floor, which is a sort of overflow room, and we have where we're live streaming the seminar, so you'll be able to see the slides and listen to the audio. Okay, so the first session today, Studying Japan the Basics, I'll be delivering this session, and in this presentation I'd like to first of all introduce very short and long-term study options offered by Japanese universities before moving on to some more general information on academic life, accommodation, social life, tuition fees, living costs, and scholarships. And then hopefully if we have a bit of time at the end, we'll do a quick trip around Japan. I'll introduce some of the regions. Okay, so if you'd like to study in Japan, but you're not sure if you want to commit to a full undergraduate or postgraduate degree, one of the best ways to get a taste of studying and living in Japan is to do a short-term program offered by universities. Most Japanese universities offer these programs. There are actually about 700 universities in Japan. In the UK, we have, I think it's 120, so there are a lot of universities in Japan, and a vast majority of them offer these short-term programs aimed at international students. All of the institutions here today offer these programs. These courses are aimed, in the main, at current university or college students, but don't let that put you off. Most institutions do actually accept working professionals who have a very strong and clear interest in Japan as well. These courses are generally 2 to 6 weeks in length. They're held at various times throughout the year, usually 2 or 3 times a year. Most cases, it's in the summer or the winter. If you're already a university student in the UK, you can fit one of these courses into your summer holiday without having to take time off from your degree at your home institution. Some courses will focus on a single topic. So, for example, Japanese business or Japanese law. But in most cases, you'll choose from 2 or 3 modules. You'll choose 2 or 3 modules from a range of choices. So these will include Japanese language, arts, anime, manga, fashion, politics, etc. So these programs are kind of like sort of mini Japanese studies programs. So if you're thinking about doing a Japanese studies degree, these are a really good way to find out what Japanese studies is all about. So these programs also incorporate hands-on experience. So if you're taking a module in, for example, Japanese art, there will probably be museum visits or gallery visits put into the program. Likewise, if you're studying a Japanese management module, there might be visits to Japanese companies or even maybe some work experience as part of the course. And most courses will include cultural elements as well. So you'll have the chance to, for example, take part in some traditional Japanese festivals, or a tea ceremony, or maybe some taiko drumming, or maybe go to see a kabuki play, this kind of thing. Tuition fees depend, obviously, on the length of the course and whether accommodation is included. In many cases, accommodation is included in your tuition fees, but they generally around 200,000 yen, so about £1,000 for a 4 to 6 week course. And in terms of application, you generally need to apply between 2 and 6 months in advance. But you can find out more about the courses offered by the universities here today. Just go up and talk to them about their short-term programs. Or you can check their websites. They all have websites in English with full details of their summer and winter programs. Okay, so another option that's open to you, if you are a current university student and your university has an inter-university exchange agreement with a Japanese institution, you can go on one of these exchange programs to the partner institution in Japan. And these are generally one term in length, but some of them are up to 3 semesters in length. In many cases, these programs are credit-bearing, so the credit you gain at the Japanese institution can be transferred back to your home institution, back in the UK. Also, inter-university agreements often extend to tuition fees as well. So if you're lucky and your university has an inter-university agreement that covers tuition fees as well, you won't have to pay tuition fees to the Japanese institution. Your home fees will cover the course in Japan as well. And the Japan Student Services Organization, JASSO, I really encourage you to remember this, JASSO. They offer scholarships for international students studying in Japan on these student exchange programs. This last year's cohort, the monthly allowance is about 80,000 yen, so about £500 a month, which will easily cover your accommodation in Japan. So I do encourage you to check the JASSO website, all in English. They have a fantastic website on studying in Japan for international aimed at international students. And of course, another way of getting out to Japan to study is to enroll in a Japanese studies degree program here in the UK. An undergraduate Japanese studies degree will usually include pretty intensive Japanese language study, and then you'll take modules of your choice to go along with this. So, for example, Japanese history, Japanese art, or culture and society, Japanese literature, for example. And in most cases, these degrees are 4 years in length, with either the second or the third year, it's usually the third year, is spent studying in Japan at a partner institution, where you'll be taking classes entirely in Japanese with Japanese students. A lot of UK universities do offer Japanese studies degrees at undergraduate and master's level. And you can see a list of these universities on the Japan Foundation London's website. And the Japan Foundation are also here today, actually. So if you do have time, go up to the Japan Foundation booth, and they have a flyer that lists all the undergraduate and postgraduate Japanese studies degrees offered in the UK. Okay, moving on to long-term programs. So these are full undergraduate and postgraduate programs in Japan. So just a word on the Japanese higher education system. So generally in Japan, undergraduate degrees will take 4 years, and master's degrees are 2 years in length. And PhDs are 3 years, as with the UK. Another key difference is the academic year. Academic year in Japan runs from April through to March. So if you're thinking of going to Japan after graduating from a UK institution, you might have 6 months to wait, but that might work in your favour, give you time to prepare. But also don't let that put you off, because actually a growing number of Japanese institutions are now accepting autumn intake as well. In fact, all of the institutions here today also accept students, international students, in the autumn. Okay, yeah, so if you want to do a degree in Japanese in Japan, you need to have fluent or near fluent Japanese. So that means you'll need at least N2 on the Japanese language proficiency test. So if you're starting from scratch to get up to N2, it depends on the person, how hard you study, but it usually takes 2 years intensive study of Japanese full-time to get up to N2 level, and maybe another 6 months to get up to N1. So if you would like to do a degree in Japanese, you need to factor that additional time for studying the language into your study plans. But don't worry, as I mentioned earlier, even if you don't speak a single word of Japanese, there are loads of options for you for studying in Japan. As I said, all the universities here today offer undergraduate and postgraduate programs taught entirely in English. They will have Japanese language modules that you can take on the side, but you really don't need to speak a single word of Japanese to enroll in these programs. And what else was it? Okay, yes, another thing about Japanese higher education that I wanted to mention is, yes, so degrees in Japan, the higher education system in Japan is heavily influenced by the North American system. So unlike in the UK, where degrees are very specialised, in Japan, undergraduate degrees will have a general education requirement. So that means that in the first 2 years of your course, you'll take a lot of options outside of your specialist field. So if you're doing a degree in, say, engineering, you'll take some core options in engineering, but also some modules in something quite unrelated. So, for example, history or English literature. And this is a requirement in Japan. So that, again, that's something you need to bear in mind when thinking about studying in Japan. In terms of, sorry, I should have moved on to the next slide there. In terms of how courses are taught in Japan, it's very similar to the UK in terms you have lectures and small group classes. But one difference is that in general, most classes are 90 minutes in length, whereas in the UK it's 50 minutes to an hour, isn't it? And as with most UK universities, Japanese universities use a credit system, so evaluation is based on a combination of exams, coursework, and attendance, crucially attendance. It's not uncommon in Japan for courses, for attendance to be worth 30%, sometimes 40% of your final score for the module. So attendance at lectures is very high in Japan, but you'll often see students sleeping in class. They're just there to record their attendance. I want to just go back to the previous slide, and something I didn't mention was scholarships. All universities in Japan, I'm pretty sure all universities in Japan offer scholarships for international students, and there are lots of scholarship opportunities. And so I really do recommend talking to the representatives at the booths today, but also checking their websites to have full details on all their scholarship programs. Some of them will cover your entire tuition fees or maybe half of your accommodation, and you can apply to multiple scholarships at the same time. But bear in mind that if you are applying for scholarships, you need to apply very early. Okay, so moving on to accommodation. One more thing I wanted to mention about Japan, is the job hunting culture in Japan. I don't know if you know, but most Japanese companies will hire new recruits in the spring, and the majority of them will be new graduates. So this means that Japanese students will spend their last year at university and sometimes half of their third year as well job hunting. So they'll be attending lots of job fairs, lots of job interviews, and not attending very many classes. So what they'll do is they'll spend the first 2 years packing in as many credits as they can, so that they can free up time in the last couple of years for job hunting. And again, if you do a full degree in Japan, that's something that you might find yourself experiencing as well if you want to stay on in Japan and work for a Japanese company. Okay, moving on to accommodation. So university accommodation is in most cases provided for international students for at least the first year, and this will be university-owned accommodation or private accommodation leased to the university. And this is an example from Keio. This is a newly built dormitory at Keio University. So pretty similar to the UK halls of residence, really. You have your own private room, which will have a bathroom, and then you'll have a communal area, lounge and a kitchen. There's always a great atmosphere in student dormitories. They're sort of the centre of student social life. And they're a great way to make friends with both Japanese and international students. Most dormitories accept both Japanese and international students. If your university doesn't provide accommodation, they will help you find an apartment by introducing some trustworthy landlords. But I should say that renting private accommodation tends to be a bit more complicated in Japan. So you need, first of all, you need a guarantor. That your university will usually be a guarantor for you. But in addition to that, you have to pay 2 months' rent up front, a further month's rent deposit, and then another month's rent called key money, which is basically a present to your landlord, thanking him or her for letting you stay, and that money doesn't come back. So you may have to pay the equivalent of 4 months' rent up front. So again, it's important to be aware of this if you are going to be renting private accommodation in Japan. Another option is to live in a share house, and share houses are becoming really popular actually in Japan. And these are really affordable places to live, and again, they're a good way of meeting fellow students, and they usually run on a month-to-month contract rather than an annual one, and the initial moving costs are much lower than with standard private accommodation. Okay, so social life. I won't go into much detail on this, as later this afternoon we have 3 UK alumni of Japanese universities coming to tell us all about their experiences of studying in Japan. So I won't say too much here, but just one thing to mention is student clubs and what they call circles, which is basically sort of another word for club. These are kind of the centre of student life, student culture on Japanese university campuses. And I really do encourage you, if you do get out to Japan, to join some clubs and some circles. There are literally hundreds of options. So not just sports, but things like photography clubs, hiking clubs. It's kind of the same as with UK universities. But the key difference is clubs tend to be quite strict, quite serious. They might practice every day. If it's a football club, they'll be practicing every single day. And they'll be taking part in intercollegiate competitions. Circles, on the other hand, are more relaxed. They maybe meet up once or twice a week, and they have lots of nomikais, which are sort of social gatherings, drinking parties. But yeah, I do really recommend you getting involved in clubs and circles if you do get out to a Japanese university. Okay, moving on to more important information, tuition fees. So as I mentioned, in Japan there are about more than 700 universities. There are 3 types of university in Japan. Around 80% are private, and the other 2 types are national universities, which are run by the national government, and public universities, which are run by the local government. These are the average annual tuition fees. So as you can see, private universities tend to be more expensive, but even private universities are still very reasonable, I think. And one thing to note is that tuition fees are the same for international students as they are for Japanese students in Japan. It's not always the case with other countries. Okay, living costs. So this is, again, a JASO-run survey that they do annually of living costs for students in Japan. And as you can see, they range from about 155,000 yen in Kanto, so that's the Tokyo area, which is about £800 a month. That includes your tuition fee as well. And down to about 110,000 yen in Tohoku, in northern Honshu, and that's about £600 a month. But the average monthly spending, not including academic fees, is about £475. So it's actually not that expensive to study in Japan. You might have the impression that Japan's a really expensive place to live, but the cost of living is actually not that high. Like eating out, for example, is actually very cheap in Japan. You can get a really, really good meal for about 1,000 yen, 800 yen, which is about £4 or £5. And if you eat in the student, the canteen in your university, it can be as little as 200 or 300 yen, which is, not even £2. So it's incredibly cheap, I think. Also, if you're a full-time student, you can supplement your income by doing a part-time job, and you can work up to 28 hours a week if you're a full-time student in Japan. Teaching English is a good way to earn some extra money on the side, and if you have some Japanese working in an izakaya, a Japanese pub, is a good way to really brush up on your Japanese and earn a bit of extra cash. Okay, scholarships and funding. The Japanese Ministry of Education, MEXT, has some fantastic scholarships. At undergraduate level, they offer scholarships for those who wish to pursue Japanese studies for a one-year program in Japan as part of their degree. MEXT also offers a 2-year scholarship for postgraduate students, and I'll talk a little bit more about that one in the next slide. JSPS, the Japanese Society for the Promotion of Science, offers scholarships through their summer program for postgraduate and PhD students. And as I mentioned, JSPS have a booth here today, so please do go along and find out about their opportunities. The Japan Foundation, the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation, and the Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation all have offices here in the UK, and between them they offer a variety of grants for postgraduate students or early career scholars wishing to study or conduct research in Japan. And of course, as I mentioned, universities all run a variety of funding programs for international students. And you can find out more at the booth today or on their respective websites. So just to tell you a little bit more about the MEXT postgraduate scholarships. These are for study or independent research in Japan. These are 2-year or 18-month scholarships. You don't need any prior knowledge of Japanese to apply for these scholarships. And as you can see, the benefits are quite generous. You get a monthly allowance of about 150,000 yen, which will easily cover your accommodation and your living costs, I think. If you need to use Japanese to conduct your research, you can also take part in a 6-month intensive Japanese language course. They also provide return airfare and help with finding accommodation. So it's a fantastic scholarship, and I encourage you to find out more by visiting their booth or checking their website, the Japanese Embassy in the UK's website. Okay, I'm a bit conscious about time. We're just about beginning to run over here, but quick trip around Japan. So if you're looking for universities and courses, it's also very important to think about where exactly in Japan you want to live. Japan is actually a really big country. I think the land area is bigger than Germany, and from north to south it really does span a huge area. And it's got 47 prefectures, so counties or states, and each has quite a distinct local culture. They have local food, local festivals. So it's really varied around the different regions of Japan. I myself lived in Tohoku, in Yamagata and Sendai for about 5 years. I'm quite biased. I love that part of Japan. It's so beautiful. It has the most amazing snow in the winter. I'd only snowed on a dry ski slope in Sheffield about before I'd been to Japan, but powder snow there is just incredible. It's just amazing. And the place I stayed, I went on the JET program originally to Japan, and I stayed in a very small mountain town that had its own ski slope. So every day after school, I went with all the students to the ski slope, and I learned to snowboard. It was just amazing. I had so much fun. But of course, you've got lots of different areas in Japan. You've got sprawling metropolises of Tokyo and Osaka, which themselves are very, very different in culture. And then you've got Okinawa, which is one of my favorite places in Japan. It's just so, so beautiful. The sea there is just unbelievably clear. It's an amazing place to go snorkeling. I really recommend it. So yeah, so when if you are thinking about going to Japan, I do recommend taking the time to find out about the different areas of Japan. Where do you actually want to live? Where do you want to study in Japan? It's not just the university rates. the kind of experiences you want to have is also very important. And one way of finding out a bit more about the different regions is to go to the Japan National Tourist Organization website. They've got some great information on the various regions in Japan. And they also run another website called Discover the Spirit of Japan, which is just full of videos for each of the regions or each aspects of Japanese culture. It introduces these, and yeah, they're really, really fantastic videos. So I do recommend having a look at those. And so just to recap, two really, really good websites for finding out all you need to know about studying in Japan are the JASO Gateway to Study in Japan website and the Japanese government's Study in Japan Comprehensive Guide. On these two websites, you really do have all the information you need to know. And one thing I forgot to mention earlier, but on the JASO website, they have a full list of all undergraduate and postgraduate courses that are taught entirely in English at Japanese universities. So I do recommend checking out their website. And I believe today we have copies of their student guide to Japan upstairs. So please do take a copy of that before you leave. Okay, so that's all for the first session today. Our next session is on working in Japan, and that will start in about 5 minutes' time. Thank you.